Hi everybody, I'm Carl and welcome to Knack 3D Designs. In today's episode, we're going to go ahead and install the drive belts for our X and Y axis motion assembly. So let's get started. Okay, in this segment, we're going to go ahead and install our drive belts for our hot end carriage. You will need your belt tensioning block, your two block clamps, your two regular clamps. We'll need two number 2 thread cutting screws, two metric 3 by 12 millimeter, two 4/6 metric 3 by 10 millimeter, two metric 3 nuts, and two metric 3 by 45 millimeter screws. Now I bought 5 meters of GT2 belt and just went ahead and cut that in half. Next thing we need to do is we need to install our clamp blocks like this. I'm going to go ahead and install the other one right now. So that one there is done. Now, so it doesn't really matter which end you pick. You do, however, want to make sure that you've got it cut completely flush up against the last cog in it. Because of the way the block is designed, if there's anything on the end past it, it's not going to slide down in there. And then I usually take my screwdriver. Try not to break it, but you do want to try and just loosen it up a little bit for the belt to go in there. I usually figure out where the 5th cog hits and try to get a little bit of it pushed in from the front edge. I won't lie, it's not easy. It will fight you. Usually once you get it started, like I just did. By the way, these cutters and pliers set was like $7 at Joann Fabric. Wonderful little set. I especially like this really wide one. It's really great for grabbing hold of these belts and pushing them in. I just keep grabbing just a little bit above the plastic cog. And I'll get just a little bit above it. And then wiggle it down in. And then move up a little further. And at one point you'll finally get to where there's so much in there you can just push on the outside edge. So just about there. Alright. Now the next thing we need to do to both of these is on the bottom here. You can see this little indent. Take a small drill bit, puncture a hole through your belt, and then we're going to run those two number 2 thread cutting screws in there nice and gently. And you're going to run them just till you see them come up through the hole in the center. And then we'll back them back out and cut a little bit off the top of them so they don't get into the area where the bolt's going to go through there. You can use the screw to cut the hole through it if you want. I've got some small miniature drill bits, work really good for just starting that hole. So just keep working it nice and slow, back and forth. Don't want to rush that in there because you don't want to crack the block. And I'm already all the way through. Just going to go ahead and do that for both of these real fast. Then we'll work on cutting these down to the right length. Now, get these to the length we want. We don't want them coming up past the bottom of this hole here. So we're basically going to take half the length of this screw off. So I'm going to take my carbide cutting wheel and grab a pair of vice grips, and I'm going to real quick lop the tops of these off, and I'll be right back. Alright, so I've cut both of the screws down to just about half as long as they were before. Go ahead and insert both of these. Now, I did find this adjustment block design out on Thingiverse. My apologies, I don't remember whose it was. The only issue I had though was trying to pull tight enough for this large assembly. I kept yanking the belts out of this block. It wasn't until I started to really trying to get the belt tight enough to do its job that I had that issue. So I figured, well, if I just add this set screw, hopefully that'll fix the problem, and so far it does seem to have fixed it. I just need to see if the bolts will slide through on both of these. I'm hitting a little bit on this one. So I'm just going to run my drill bit through there and clear it out. I'm going to put it on backwards first so I don't snag and rip my block apart. Now that we've done both of these blocks, next thing we need to do is install our tensioner block on the front of the carriage. The two 10mm screws go at the top, two 12s go at the bottom of it. And I'll give a little zoom in here in just a second once I've got it in place to show you what it looks like there. Now you don't want to tighten these screws all the way down, because once you tighten these down snug, the blocks shouldn't slide in and out real easy. Just an added step to make sure the belt doesn't work loose. You want there to be just a little bit of slop in there. And you can see the blocks installed with the 4 screws. Now what we're going to do is we're going to run our belts. Now one block has got a tapered corner on it. If you can quite see that tapered corner right here at the top. That block goes on the right hand side of this tensioner. Sit right there like that. So now with the teeth up, we're going to go ahead and feed it into the end bracket of our carriage. I'm going to pull it up, feed it through the top bearing in our rear idler. Tuck it back down to this hole so we're running in the groove of the extrusion. We will need a flathead screwdriver at some point. Now we'll feed it across. and push it down behind the bearing on this idler. And we're going to pull it all the way past. We're going to feed it down past the stepper. And drop it back in the groove. Right, so it's going to go on the outside of the gear on your stepper, around in front of it, and on this side of the little idler pulley we have right here. And it's going to feed through here. Then it will come across, and we will lock it onto our carriage. Now we need to do the same thing the other way around. Alright, now we've got both of these run. At some point, we may have to adjust the height of the gears on our steppers. I eyeballed them as straight as I could, but we may have to play with that a little bit. Now the next thing we'll need to do is put our clamps on to hold our belts in place. Those use the 10mm screws. We've got one clamp that goes right here. I usually try to start the bottom screw. Set it in place. Then just go ahead and feed your belt through. Now for now, just snug it in place because we're going to pull it tight in a little bit. Now we do the same thing for this side. Now this one rests down here against the bottom of the carriage. You may have to file off just a little bit of this so it sets far enough down for you to get the top screw in. I've already filed off just a little bit of this one. We'll do the same thing. We'll feed this belt in. And just snug these in place for the moment. Now the next thing we need to do is install our 2 metric 3 nuts and our 45mm bolts through our tension block. And you may have noticed when you try to slide these blocks in that they hang up just a little bit because of the belt. The notches just aren't quite deep enough. Usually what I just do is take a razor blade and clean off just this last little edge that's sticking out the side from being squished into this block. Now I trimmed it flush and it slides in nice and neat. I'll do the same on this other side now. Alright, now I'm going to reposition camera so you can see me doing all the tension work over here. And so next step, we're going to go ahead and drop our metric 3 nuts in these 2 slots right here. Try and make sure that you get the flat edges up against the flat edges in the slot. And don't drop it. There we go. Not quite in far enough yet. Should bottom out, lined up. I got that first nut installed. Just run this in a little bit. Run it back out. Now I admit, before I installed this, I ran the same drill bit that I used to clear all my threads out, and I ran it all the way through and came out the other side. Made sure it was clear of all filings and debris from this plastic. If you get a little bit on it and you try to adjust this and roll this out, it will act like a seize and it will lock it up, and then you'll have to reprint this whole thing, because I've destroyed two trying to do this without drilling the hole out the back end and clearing it all out. Alright, so now next step is to go ahead and install and tension our belts a little bit. We will do the fine-tune tensioning once we have the aluminum build plate in place to check proper level against, which was the reason I went with this design instead of just pulling the belts tight, because, well, I only have one line to level on this printer. You've got one line where you're making contact the first time, every time against the belt as you print. So you really need to make sure this very front edge is level to the print head for bed leveling. That's why at the moment I haven't bothered to try and put any kind of automatic bed leveling system in, because it kind of seemed pointless to run a bed leveling system on one straight line. I'm going to run this screw in basically to just where that block is starting to be inside the tensioner block housing. That right there works pretty good. I'm going to do the same thing for the other side here. So now I've got both ends loose. What we're going to do now is we're going to loosen the 4 screws on the back side of the block here, and we're just going to pull the belt snug and tight and then lock them down, and then we will finish tensioning it from the other side. Now they're both kind of just snug. We can go ahead and crank these in nice and tight now. I do try to move this every once in a while just to kind of make sure I'm spreading the tension even across the whole belt. I just run the block in flush. I said, now once we get the belt in here, we can figure level. We may need to like loosen a tooth on one side or the other. Now I'm going to go ahead and crank this one corner down just to kind of help lock that in place. Again, move and adjust a little bit. And now I'm going to go ahead and tighten this one up. I may have that too tight. We'll see how it sounds when I do the function test on it. And for now, I'm going to call that good right there. Now I'm going to go ahead and finish tightening up all these. Now we have plenty of extra here. Once we're sure of our tension, I'll probably cut off and leave just I usually just leave the width of the belt across the back so I can tuck them in behind the wires and they stay put, but that still leaves me enough to grab hold of with a pair of pliers to pull tight later if I need to retension. And that completes installing our belts. Alright, so that wraps up today's episode. Now remember, when you get ready to start ordering the parts for your white knight, or you just need another roll of filament, check out the Printed Solid affiliate link in the description below. If you want to help support this channel and future projects, there is also an Amazon wish list and a PayPal me link in the description. And as always, if you like what I'm doing here, subscribe to the channel and ring that bell for updates. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you soon.